Okay, so I want to finish today talking about two kinds of things, regional modernism and expressionist modernism. So these are part of the same modernist genre that we've been talking about that emerges in both Europe and the United States. It spreads across the world, and as it spreads across the world, we start to see other cultures and places say, wait a second, we need to adapt this for our own unique culture or materials or environment or whatever. And so we get a rise of regionalism, but we also see a lot of architects who like the concept of modernism, which is stripping away ornament and not reviving historical styles, but the international style, the Miesian approach to modernism. Many architects begin to say, well, that's a little bit boring. Okay, we could still have really creative artistic buildings, but we don't need to do it by putting Greek columns on it or making it look like a Gothic cathedral. And so and often these two concepts mold together. We see a lot of regionalism that also is expressionist or whatever. So I kind of combine these two things in this lecture here. So here's a little background on the regional modernism and the fact that many architects began to reject the sort of very plain, formal, international style, the Corbu points and the Miesian, almost nothing architecture. So I'm going to show you a few examples, and I'm going to really run through these quickly because we're just really short on time. There's only so much I can cover, I guess, but I would just want to give you a flavor of some of the architects and some of the work that they were doing. And the first one is probably the first really, real example of this concept, and it goes all the way back to the 1920s by Erich Mendelsohn. We briefly mentioned him previously, but this is the main example I want to show you. This is the Einstein Tower in Potsdam, Germany, just outside of Berlin. And this was just a little research observatory. You can see pointer. Right on the top is the actual telescope observatory, set us up on a tower so that they get a view of the sky, and a small little building. And Mendelssohn really creates these molded plastic forms. He does it in brick, and he just stuccos it, covers it in stucco. It looks like it ought to be in concrete, but it's not. But he just wanted to create a fanciful creation. There's no ornament applied here. It's not Gothic, it's not Greek or anything like that. So it's a modernist building, but it doesn't look anything like the modernism of Mies van der Rohe or early Le Corbusier. And so it's much more expressionist. And this is one of my favorite. This is a little sketch he did of the thing. And I think this is a fun little sketch to show that. Here's another view of it from the front, showing just how it would have molds and forms, and you just walk right up into the entranceway, and then here you more clearly see the domed observatory on the top. So another architect that worked in this genre is Walter Netsch. He also worked for SOM out of the Chicago office. Here he is. He actually was the designer for the University of Illinois Chicago campus. So if you've been on that campus, you see a little bit of his work there. They've actually modified it significantly in the last 15, 20 years. And a lot of the design elements that Netsch had done have been removed, but in part because they weren't very successful. I'm not a big fan of Netsch's work, but the example I want to show you here is the Cadet Chapel at the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs from 1962. Most of this campus, designed by SOM, by Netsch, is Miesian, the pure Chicago Miesian approach to architecture. But for the chapel, he designed something that is really expressionist. And I got to see this a few years ago, and I was really blown away in person. You can see a little bit of just the sort of plain, Miesian buildings here in the foreground, but then shooting out of that like a jet fighter, shooting up into the sky, right, is this cadet chapel. And it also kind of mimics, it's regional because it mimics the mountains in the background as well. This is right on the foothills of the Rocky Mountains. So it's combining the expression of, of what it is to be in the Air Force, to fly, fast jet planes shooting up into the sky, but it also ties it to its site of the Rocky Mountains. Here's a view of the front. And I actually think this is a reinterpretation of a Gothic church as well. It's soaring, it's vertical, it expresses its structure, but it doesn't do that by mimicking anything, Gothic. It is pure 20th century architecture, and nothing here is, as true, reference to Gothic architecture. But I kind of think of these concrete pylons along the side as like the flying buttresses, right? They kind of hold the building together, or keep it from, flying or, falling down on itself. But these aren't, Gothic style, So in a way, he's really paying homage to Gothic architecture without having to copy it or mimic it. This is the interior, and it's got it's got stained glass, just the way a Gothic church would. Here's a view with the stained glass, but it isn't, it's modern. It's not, Gothic, images of religious scenes or whatever. It's just, beautiful colored glass that creates a beautiful effect when you're in the inside. Another great, and one of my favorites, is the Finnish architect Alvar Aalto. Here is Alto. He really was the leader of the sort of Scandinavian aesthetic. Scandinavians are well known for their modern designs, and both of materials and commercial products, but also architecture as well. Although technically Finland isn't Scandinavia, so but it's all the same kind of region. That northern Baltic, long dark winters, cold, lots of snow. And so to Alto, what was important was the use of, of wood, which is plentiful in this region, and the use of the stone that is natural to the sites, and getting as much light into these buildings as possible, because on these long dark winters, if you don't have good natural light, people get kind of depressed, and so that was important to him. So one of the examples I want to show you is a sanatorium in Paimo, Finland, from 1929 to 33. So this is pretty early in his career. This is really representing that early international style that we saw come out of the Bauhaus with Walter Gropius and the early work of Corbusier and even Mies at that time. So we see white stucco, we see balconies. You can tell that this isn't just a big box, it's a series of wings. The planning principle that we saw at the Bauhaus, which has its roots in Frank Lloyd Wright's planning principles, we can see pretty clearly here. And he does this so that all of the patients have rooms with a view and with lots of light. And this was important to him, that the patients that had to live here had plenty of view, plenty of light, and it would help, that alone would help to improve their health, because even medicine in the 1920s and 30s didn't necessarily always have good solutions medically, but this would at least give them some comfort as they stayed here as patients. And he really studied. He studied the furniture so that people lying in the bed or sitting in a chair would have the good ability to breathe and would have, be comfortable. He really took this to heart, and compare that to like the Frank Lloyd Wright furniture that we saw of the Prairie School that was not comfortable, right? This is the kind of design thinking and aesthetic that the Scandinavians and the Finns became very known for, especially Alto. I want to show you his home and studio. His home was designed 1934 to 36, and then he built a separate studio in 1955 as he became more successful. This is his house. So this is an earlier 1930s international style example, but so we see a lot of white monolithic walls, but also notice we see wood. We didn't see that in the Bauhaus. We didn't see that at the Waisenhofsiedlung complex in Stuttgart that those modernist architects were doing. But in Finland, where there's trees everywhere, it's more important to have that character and to have that material. And we also see, this is a back view, there's more of that wood, but we also see natural granite boulders that are natural to the site and to the locale, used as a retaining wall here to kind of root the house to, or anchor it to the site. This is a good example of regionalism. He's using the materials of the site to provide a setting for the house, that it makes it look like it belongs where it is and couldn't just be transplanted anywhere. Nice interior view. Lots of glass and windows, again, to let in lots of natural light. You can see some of the furniture that he is known for. This was his original drafting studio in the house. Again, lots of light. And then this is the studio that he built in 1955, just a couple blocks away. He created this little natural amphitheater and curved the wall of the studio to help create this amphitheater, and that helps root it to the land. This is, very much a international style building still, white monolithic walls, a ribbon window, but it, flat roofs, all that, but it is grounded to its site literally by this, stonework and this little amphitheater here. Here's a view inside that studio space. And another part of the studio. This kind of reminds me of Taliesin, Taliesin West. These big sort of angled beams. In this case, they're not in the desert, so we don't see the canvas coverings, but we do see good clear story windows that let in lots of light into this space, so the people working in the studio could have good lighting in there. And one of my favorites is this little conference room. When you're sitting in here, this got this display panel, and you see this warm glow of light coming down over that, and you think, wow, that's a pretty, great way to light this space. Here's a view of that with a little more contrast. But then when you go up and underneath it, you see that in the daytime, at least, it's all naturally lit. I think this is just a great detail. At night, there's some electric lights, that would light this up as well, but you don't need those during the daytime because it's just a warm glow of light that comes down this display panel. Perhaps his most famous work is Finnlandia Hall in Helsinki. This is from 1962 to 71. And this is basically a big entertainment complex. There's, concert halls and all that. And he's expressing all of that quite literally. The bulk of the building you can see here is very Corbu-like. There's some even almost a sense of pilotis for this canopy here. We got the ribbon windows. We got monolithic white slab walls, flat roof, except then he introduces this massive angled element that is over one of the big concert halls. And it represents, it expresses the fact that there is something happening in here. And so this really becomes a more expressionist form of architecture, because he's not just making a plain, simple box, and you don't know, it could be anything inside the Miesian universal space. Here, we now know what is going on inside, or we have an idea, because he expresses that on the exterior. Here's another view, and again, he uses the brown granite that is natural to the site. Here we see cut away, and he forms that, polishes it off, and he uses that as the base of the building to tie the building to the site directly. Really strong sense of anchoring the building to the site here. He also uses white travertine or white Carrara marble from Italy, which didn't work. He had it cut too thin for this really harsh winter environment, and it looks like almost like a basket weave on the surface. It's not supposed to look like that. It's supposed to be very monolithic surface, but over time, in the freeze-thaw conditions of Finland, they cupped, and so it actually looks more like this basket weave effect, which is not what he originally intended. And here's another view. And again, here he's showing, curved wall spaces that reflect a different kind of space inside. So it's not just one big rectangular box, and that's what makes this expressionist. So the next example is something I think all of you are going to recognize. This is one of the most iconic buildings of Chicago. You show this to just about anybody, and they say, "Oh, that's in Chicago," and that's in a City by Bertrand Goldberg. Here we see him with actually that's not Marina City. Those are some other towers that he designed. He's from Germany, and he worked for Mies in Germany. Came to the United States in '37, also fleeing the Nazis, and really, kept being influenced by Mies van der Rohe, working in the international style. But by the 1960s, he began to sort of think, we could do something a little different, maybe, something better. And he really started working in a more expressionist. He started working more with concrete and using the plasticity of concrete to express architecture more creatively than he felt that the Miesian aesthetic was. And one of the great pieces that comes out of that philosophy is Marina City from 1964. And of course, people refer to these as the corn cob towers. You can say that in a way, these are regionalist because they look like big corn cobs, which, Illinois is known for cornfields, at least once you get out of the city. And so people have always sort of made that connection or whatever. But truly, this is more meant to be expressionist here and just creating, the plasticity of concrete. He's expressing the parking structures that are on the base of the buildings, and then you've got the curved balconies that provide more of a vista. You step onto the balcony that's rectangular and you have a view straight out. If you step onto a balcony that's circular, you have a vista that is, more of an arced angle, and it gives you a better view. And especially on that site at the bend on the Chicago River, there's an opportunity for great vistas out here. If you've never gotten a tour, I know Francis's daughter lived in Marina City for a while, and so some of you might have actually been able to go into her apartment or something at one point if Francis was setting that up. But look at the base here is where the bowling alley is. This is definitely expressionist. I mean, this is like a big, saddle, form that is a concrete, structural shell. And then I think it's clad in copper. It's a really, bulbous, curving, dramatic form that is not Miesian in the least, right? And here's a view from one of the apartments. So this isn't Francis's daughter, but you can see how you get a vista that is more open than if you just had plain rectangular balconies on the side of the building. I think here's another vista, and if you got one of these views, you got the money shot here with the city and the lake and the river. It's just an incredible location. A couple of views of apartments, and again, if you haven't been inside, if you ever get the opportunity, definitely try to take a tour if somebody offers you that opportunity, or like Chicago Open House or something like that. They're very weird because it is a circular building, so all the apartments are pie-shaped. It's got to make it pretty difficult to arrange your furniture, but especially if you have one of the smaller ones. Here's the narrow end of the pie where the kitchen is, and you can see it gets almost down to a point there. So I'm not sure I'd want to live in one of these, to be honest, but the view would be great. So another great architect that works in this genre is Louis Kahn. Here is an image of Kahn. He was from Estonia, what's now the Republic of Estonia. When he was born, it was part of the Russian Empire, and came to the United States again and worked out of Philadelphia and was really a major innovator in concrete construction and using concrete in an architectural manner and an expressive manner. And this little quote down at the bottom is one of his famous quotes, and he's talking to a brick. And he wants to know, Brick, what do you want to be? And the Brick says, well, I want to be an arch. And he says, well, what if, arches are expensive, Brick. What if I just use a lintel, a steel or concrete lintel over you? And he says, Brick says, no, I want to be an arch. Don't make something that isn't true to my form, is what he's really saying here. And this really wraps up the whole philosophy of good modernist architecture. Use materials in the way that they are meant to be used. And so there's nothing wrong with using an arch. The Romans figured out, brick arches. And that's how a brick has its great structural stability to span an opening. Yeah, you can put a lintel in, but then you're not really using brick in the way it ought to be. And that's the point he's trying to make here. So perhaps his most famous and greatest work, well, there's a couple of contenders here, but certainly one of them would be the Salk Institute in La Jolla, California from 1966. This is on sunny California coast between LA and San Diego. And it's a research institute where scientists would work and study. They'd have laboratories and they'd have offices. And what he does is he creates a central courtyard, almost like a campus-like atmosphere, and he focuses that courtyard out west to the vista of the Pacific Ocean. And all of the offices have angled walls that then have windows that look out towards the Pacific. And he wanted, if I go to the next slide, you'll see a floor plan. So the Pacific and the coastline is off to the left. Here's the two wings of the building and the courtyard in the center. And so he wanted each of these researchers in their office to have this pastoral view to the Pacific Ocean. And he felt that that would be inspirational, that it would give them something to kind of get their mind away from whatever detailed little project and research that they were working on, whether it was a mathematical computation or some chemical, chemistry formula or something like that. They could just look out and they could free their mind of the cloudiness of whatever they were working on, and then that might help them refocus on whatever difficult problem that they were trying to solve. And in a way, it goes back to the planning philosophy of Thomas Jefferson at the University of Virginia that we talked about before, the campus quadrangle with the individual pavilions to create, vistas into this bucolic setting in between. And he does that here at the Salk Institute. This is a section cutaway of the complex, or at least one wing of the complex. And so the bulk of the building here in the center are the laboratories, and these are laboratories, they're there's no windows, they're hermetically sealed and all that you would need if you're running, experiments and you working with chemicals and all that kind of stuff. But the office wings over here on the right are pods that stick out and are connected by sky bridges so that they can be separate and so that they can have these vistas into the courtyard and off into the distance. And so we see those pods pretty clearly here, and we see the angled walls and the windows that allow each office to have a vista to the ocean, which is, in this photo, is to the right, sort of behind the photographer here. And so their view is directly out to the ocean into this inner courtyard. Here we can see a nice view of some of that. He uses wood as well here, just the way we saw Alto using wood. And he didn't paint it, he just left it raw. And it's meant to just sort of gray and weather over time to reflect the true nature of wood rather than something fake or false using paint. And in a climate like this, you can get away with that. In Chicago, you can't leave untreated wood. It would rot away pretty quickly. And he also is a master of concrete. Here's the concrete. And all these little dots and all these lines, these are all part of the formwork that is necessary to pour concrete. You see the lines of the formwork, and then the dots are where the ties are that hold the formwork together while the wet concrete is inside of it. You take the formwork off, you knock off the ties, and he does it. He makes sure that this is done so that they create essentially a decorative pattern on the concrete. This could be random. If you leave it to the contractor, they're just going to do it whatever, and it would be very random. He wants it very specific, and he guides the contractor of exactly how he wants the forms to be made so that when they're taken off, it creates a decorative surface to the raw concrete. Here's a view of one of the offices. All right, the other great work, many consider to be one of his best, is the Kimball Art Museum in Fort Worth, Texas, between 66 and 72. And here's a model of it. And this is created by a series of Roman barrel vaults. You know, going all the way back to the last semester when we talked about Roman barrel vaults. He does this here in the 1960s in a really, really creative, modern way. You know, this is not, this is not a Roman work of architecture. It's a truly modern form of construction. Here's a little sketch that he did. This is a section sketch. And the reason he liked the barrel vault form here is because he could have an opening for light to filter down into these gallery spaces. And by bundling the barrel vaults, you can see again in the last slide, the way they're bundled, they provide structural support to each other, and you can open them up in between so that the galleries kind of connect together. Here's a nice view of how they're bundled together side by side. And then he's just got an open one here on the end to create kind of a porch-like impact. There's that porch here. You can clearly see the barrel vaulted form and shape. Really easy to make out of concrete. And that's what the Romans did, actually. They built their barrel vaults generally out of concrete. So he's actually being very, very true to the original Roman idea here. Here's a building section. I don't have time to get into the intricacies of the way this building is lit. It uses a lot of diffuse natural light that comes in and is sort of diffused down the slope of the barrel vault into the gallery walls. And in an art gallery, lighting is really fundamental. Here we get a nice view of how he does that and how he can open up the spaces in between the barrel vaults. But it's really an incredible space. If you ever get the chance to go to Dallas, definitely go out to visit the Kimball, not just for the artwork, but for the architecture as well. Here's another view of one of the galleries. And then I think the last example by Louis Kahn I want to talk about is the National Assembly. This is basically the Capitol building in, well, what was then Bangladesh. I think it's now known as Sri Lanka, in Dhaka from 1961, not finished until 1982. And this is the main assembly building, essentially like their Capitol building. And he uses concrete here, and he uses these strong geometric forms, but in this aerial view, you can also see that he sets it in this moat-like setting. And, you know, if you're familiar with this part of Southeast Asia, there's a lot of water, and, you know, it's very swampy, very jungle-like. And so he creates a setting in which these buildings are set within the watery landscape. And that's a way that he ties this complex. It's international, it's modernist, but he ties it to the site by introducing the water around the buildings here. And here's another view of that. Here he's using some brick and some concrete. It's a mix of different materials here. Here's kind of a cool misty morning view with the water and the building in the background. There's a model of the Assembly Hall building. So here you can see where the legislators would meet together, and a view of some of the interiors. Very strong geometries here. This is, you know, a common theme in sort of the 60s and 70s, these strong triangles and circles and so forth. All right, so I'm going to keep going just a little bit. We're almost done. So if you have to cut away for a class or something, feel free to do so. But I want to finish up the lecture because this will be part of the quiz, your flashcards and quiz that are coming up. Flashcards are due on Tuesday. We'll have a quiz next Thursday. So I put the flashcard assignment up. So remember that, and then the quiz will be a week from today. So I want to finish talking about Le Corbusier, or Corbu, Here he is again with his famous round glasses. And we talked about him earlier on with his 5 points and with his early international style work. But later in his career, he kind of broke away from that and he became more of an expressionist architect. And one of the best examples to show you is one of my favorite, about the only Corbu building that I actually like, and that's Ronchamp. Notre-Dame de Haute in Ronchamp. Most people just call it Ronchamp. This is from 1951 to 55. And it's just a little chapel building for a convent, a little convent of nuns, in a bucolic rural setting in rural France. And he creates something that doesn't have a straight line or a square angle anywhere in it. Everything is curved and formed and sloped and dramatic. But what I really like about it is it creates, instead of a steeple, a standalone steeple or whatever, he lets the building curve up at this corner and point up to the heavens or point up to God, the way a steeple kind of forces you to do. But it does also have a separate campanile over here on the side. Here's another view of that, also getting you the sense of, swooping up, looking up towards the heavens, up to God. And you can see that it has randomly placed windows on the walls. It has curved and sloped and angled walls. Interestingly, it looks like it ought to be all formed concrete, but much of this is actually framed and stuccoed for cost reasons, really. Corbu certainly worked a lot in concrete, but the nuns didn't have the funds to do it that way. So he sort of framed it up in steel and so forth, and then just covered it in stucco. And you can see that in this section, how the roof form is hollow, how even the walls are hollow themselves. So it's a little bit of a fake thing. Again, one of the things I have about Corbu is that he has issues, and one of these is it looks like it's this incredible concrete, poured concrete form, and you find out that it's all kind of fake in the end, but it's still a really cool form. And here's the interior of it. Really cool interior. Again, all sloping and curved walls. Look at the way that the roof is held off of the wall up here. And there's a little sliver of light between the two and just a couple of connecting points. That's a really cool detail and really creates a nice light and spiritualness inside this space. And then the window wall, again, art class, something, Gothic, medieval, just like we saw at the Cadet Chapel by Walter Netsch. This isn't, medieval stained glass. It's just geometrically formed colored glass that really lets in a beautiful glow of light into this space. I was here over 30 years ago, and I was just blown away. It's an incredible space. All right, here's a axonometric view of it, but I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. The other example I want to show you is Chandigarh in Punjab, India. This is from 1951 to 59, and this is the capital of the state of Punjab. So in India, they have states like the US sort of has, and so the state of Punjab, its capital is at Chandigarh, and Le Corbusier was hired to design this. So here we see in pure concrete, pure poured concrete, this sort of curving roof form here. We see a lot of water because, again, this is in an environment where water and jungle are more predominant. But we definitely see more of the use of concrete here by Corbusier. Here's an open plaza. I'm just going to flip through these kind of quickly. We see the sculptural artistic forms on the roofs here, similar to the way Alto did at Finnlandia Hall, where the base of the building is more straightforward and traditional, but there's more expression. This is the assembly building, so this is the big skylight over top of the legislative assembly that will let in light to the assembly hall. Here we see another view of that building. Some other buildings, also introducing bold colors the way Corbu often did. And even just a commercial building in the city, market hall building here, introducing geometries and sort of a pilotis element here so that you have a covered walkway for the vendors to have their, produce or something's displayed out. Oscar Niemeyer is another great architect in this genre. He was Brazilian, very much influenced by Corbusier and the Modernist movement, and he's best known for designing the complex of Brasilia, the capital of Brazil. And here we can see a little bit of his concept about not wanting to have straight lines. They're too hard, they're too inflexible, they're man-made. He wanted free-flowing lines that are more sensual, more natural, like the mountains or on a woman's body or whatever. The curves and the forms really are more natural, and so he wanted his buildings to sort of reflect that. Here is a view of Brasilia. Of course, there's more modern buildings that have been added to the site over time, but the main sort of Capitol building is off here in the distance, and then there's a museum and a chapel space over here on the right, with a big sort of mall-like setting, similar to Washington, D.C. Here's a view of the Capitol building. There's some straight lines here, but there's a lot of curve. You've got a curved bowl here for part of the assembly hall, and then a domed space off in another portion of it. This is one of the interiors of the museum space, and you can see curved domed space in here. This is the National Cathedral. Beautiful sculpted building with these concrete structural forms and then glazed walls in between. And a really nice view of the interior with lots of blue and green representing the Amazon River and the ocean, natural to Brazil. So he's introducing, elements that are part of Brazil's culture and identity into the glass of the cathedral here. And one of the building complexes, the Ministry of Foreign Relations here. I'm going to just skip through some of these quickly because we're really out of time. This is the National Museum. Really cool. This is almost from outer space. If you were doing a 1950s or 60s sci-fi movie of Martians coming to Earth or Earthlings going to Mars or something, you could film it here and people would be convinced, I'm sure. Really cool geometries. You can see some of the influence of Corbusier in some of these geometries here. Okay, another architect, real briefly, is Jorn Utzon. Utzon is a Danish architect, and he's most famous for one of the probably most identifiable of expressionist architects, and that's the Sydney Opera House here. And this is both expressionist, but it's also regional, right? These look like sails in Sydney Harbor. And, people would have been used to seeing the sails of sailing ships in the harbor, and he's reflecting that. So it sort of ties it to its specific site, but it's also very expressionist because of these concrete forms here. And of course, this is the icon of Australia, even, certainly of Sydney and of Australia in general, is this one building here. That's how powerful architecture can be when it's really well done. Somebody can look at this and go, "Oh, that's the Sydney Opera House. That's Australia, mate." It's really a powerful symbol. And there we go. It's another view of that. Here's the interior. He also did work in Kuwait. This is the National Assembly Hall in Kuwait. And this is concrete, but it's meant to look like the sort of fabric tent-like structures that the Bedouin and the Arabs on the, in the Middle East often more traditionally used. And so he's also making this regional and expressionist at the same time by giving the sense of that traditional architecture of the Middle East. So you can really see that here. This looks like, draped canvas, but it's all concrete. And lastly, I want to mention Kenzo Tange. Kenzo Tange is a Japanese architect. He was probably the most prominent post-World War II architect, and he embraced the modernist aesthetic, but he felt that it ought to reflect the cultures and traditions and materials of Japan itself. And we see in his own house that it is very modern, but it definitely evokes the idea of a traditional Japanese house, with the sort of sloped roof and almost soji-like screens, but doing so with modern materials and a modern aesthetic. Almost Corbusian here. It sets up on pilotis. We don't have a flat roof like Corbu would have in his 5 points, but we do have bands of windows and free-flowing facades and interiors, and even a roof deck along here. So he takes the Corbusian principles and he adapts it to a more traditional Japanese culture and setting. This is the Hiroshima Peace Museum. Again, very much a Corbusian aesthetic here, sets on pilotis, free-form facades, flat roof. But in his project for the Yoyogi National Gymnasium in Japan, 1964, he creates a much more expressionist work here that looks like it's an assembly hall of some sort, and uses these concrete forms to span the space so that you have an open, interior gym space. So really good combination of expressionist architecture, but tying these in, especially those earlier examples, to Japanese culture. Okay, that finished